Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.
I think at this point, having hung out with you for a while, that I could do word associations and be like desk lamp, and you'd be like steelhead. Honda Accord, steelhead. Everything reminds you of steelhead.
I wouldn't feel quite comfortable like steelhead fishing somewhere where there isn't graffiti under bridges and stuff. Or shopping carts sitting at the river.
Ooh, I'm Joe Cermelli. I caught a snakehead. It was 10 pounds. Why doesn't everybody like snakeheads?
It's like Toys for Tots, only it's scrap lead for Bob the Garbage Man and maybe Kenny the Benny if he gets out of the rehab soon.
Good morning, degenerate anglers, and welcome to Bent, the fishing podcast that believes that Thanksgiving is just a ploy by Big Turkey Pharma to offload more of their dry, disgusting Godzilla birds, which anglers will eat while scoffing at farm-raised salmon. I'm Joe Cermelli.
I'm Hayden Samak. Is that a turkey farming joke?
It could be. I don't know. Anyway, so on this week's show, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna have a little fun. With some questionable choices in wading, right? We're going to talk Thanksgiving Eve watering holes and shady Black Friday gear deals. But first, Hayden, what, sir, did you do for Thanksgiving?
Well, I was hoping to head back east, as you know. In fact, you and I were talking about linking up and doing a little fishing, but I ended up just kicking around Bozeman.
Yeah, I'd say you did because you're not here. You're not where I am right now. So,
we did a wild game Friendsgiving out here, and then went out and did some fishing. Yep, and it was a good time was had by all.
There you go.
What did you end up getting into? Anything good?
Nope, not at all. We hosted, which is fine, right? But between hosting and now, I have little kids. The days of some kind of like dawn patrol mission Thanksgiving morning long over, or at least I should say they're on hiatus for a while. Yeah. I can't just like bail and walk into a hot meal like I used to. It just doesn't work anymore. I get more excited about getting outside the following days, right after Thanksgiving. Right. But the actual day it's a bit mellow for me. Like it's just my parents were over, which is nice, but it's not like a big extravaganza capped off like in the old days by your mom and aunts all like running to Kmart at midnight for the Black Friday sale. Yeah, you know what I mean. Speaking of which, speaking of Black Friday, you're perpetually broke as shit. So I'd imagine you're probably going to seize the opportunity to knock out some, discount Black Friday holiday shopping. Yes? Maybe?
I am broke as shit, Joe. That's correct.
I know.
I had no idea Bozeman was going to cost basically the same as New York City.
Little surprise. Yeah.
Well, mostly it's because I'm like terribly irresponsible and buy all sorts of gear, but that's not really here nor there. I do intend to take advantage of some Black Friday sales, though. These days, at least per TV, they start in September, and you never actually have to go to a store.
That's true. You start hearing about Black Friday in September. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Which reminds me that Meat Eater's Black Friday sale just kicked off a few days ago. So if anybody listening is looking to save a little on First Light gear, Meat Eater gear, FHF, and so on and so forth, head on over to themeateater.com and check that out.
Yeah, you absolutely should do that. And in other shopping news, while it's not marked down for Black Friday, I'm afraid, I am pretty pumped to announce that you can now purchase select rods and reels from our sponsors, 13 Fishing, directly on the Meat Eater website, which is pretty cool. Many of those selections were picked by me. And there are a lot of the rods and reels that you've seen me use in the last 2 seasons of B-Side Fishing. Now, if you're crazy broke, like Hayden broke, like mega broke, right? I do also have a recommendation for a less reputable dealer of fishing wares. You okay with buying secondhand, man? Like, you got issue with that? I don't think so, but
It depends on what it is. But if it's fishing wear, sure.
yeah, okay. Well, what about an item that perhaps fell off one truck and ended up on another?
What?
Never mind. Forget I said that. Anyhow,
sketchy.
look, we recently got a message. It is sketchy, isn't it? We recently got a message from our dear friend and striper chunking expert, Bob the Garbage Man Bertana, and I assumed it would be a fishing report because it's still peak striper season out here.
Yeah.
But I think this was actually intended for you, man. Like, he specifically left me a note that said, like, even you could afford this shit, and he might even be willing to extend you some further discounts.
It's bad when even like Bob the Garbage Man is taking pity on you.
Yes, it is. Anyway, getting into the holiday spirit, I figured I'd pass the deals and savings on to our listeners. Bob seems to be, we'll say he's in quite the rush, right, to unload this stuff. So you guys might want to act fast. And he's selling a bunch of, well, just listen. Just take a listen.
This is Bob the Garbage Man Bertana, president of Bob's Discount Tackle Emporium, or whatever, which is located in the rented Ryder moving truck parked behind Lucky Wayne's mother's row home. Anyway, you need to buy shit for the sorry excuse for a striper fisherman in your life, and let me tell you, everything I got is priced to move. For one day only, buy any NASCAR commemorative plate, get 2 free. Drill a hole in them, attach a big treble hook, and your mook husband won't know they ain't the same bunker spoons every lazy sack of shit troller he idolizes on the internet is pulling around the harbor. You've heard of the Tickle Me Elmo? We got the Tickle or Momo. It's just a piece of broom handle with 2 googly eyes superglued on it. Stick it in a glass case, tell your boyfriend it's a limited edition plug from some Rhode Island tool shed. He'll think you spent more than the $2 I'm asking, and everybody's happy. Especially him, because he don't actually fish anyway. Also, if you need something for the mini mooks in your life, I got a load of official Disney ball caps. They got Tom and Jerry on them or some shit. I'd take $20 a piece just to get rid of them. Finally, remember, nothing says Merry Christmas like scrap lead under the Hanukkah bush. So if you got any, bring it down when you stop by the store. It's like Toys for Tots, only it's scrap lead for Bob the Garbage Man and maybe Kenny the Benny if he gets out of the rehab soon. For every pound we receive, I'll probably donate at least 50% of that to a nearshore underwater environment. So come on down and climb into our rented truck late at night. If we ain't here, come back later. But do not knock on the door, because Wayne's mother is sick and sleeps like 22 hours a day.
Jesus, man.
Yeah, I actually kind of regret sharing that. If you happen to like take him up on some of those like really exciting deals there, make sure you bring a buddy and let at least a couple people know exactly where you are and what time to call the cops if you're not back. Anyhow. Speaking of deals, right? I thought in honor of Black Friday and shopping, we could play a little game. How's that sound?
Yeah, what's that?
All right. Well, everyone knows, right? I think you can really get some really good deals out of infomercials if you call like while they're playing, right?
Good deals, scams, 6 of one, half dozen
Same
of the
thing.
other.
Yeah, exactly. Sham wow, sham not wow, whatever. Well, this idea came to me. So I was half asleep on the couch not long ago trying to get over that cold I had when I sounded like ass on this show. And when you're sick and like passed out on the couch, yeah, whatever. Zing, you zonked me, you zinged me, fine. Anyway, when you're sick and you're like passed out on the couch and like you're kind of in and out of it. I passed out and like woke up and there was some infomercial on. Now, in between like drifting off to dreamland, I would just catch little snippets of them describing what they were selling.
Yeah.
And I got to thinking, right? There are so many well-known cult classic infomercials for fishing gear. Like every angler knows them and makes fun of them, right? So Would you be able, I thought, to recognize them by just a quick soundbite?
I think I see where you're going with this.
Yes, you do. So here we go, right? In honor of Black Friday, I created a little game for you to play, okay? We're going to test your metal. I'm going to tee up a couple clips. We'll pepper some throughout the show here, and you're going to guess, is it fishing gear or exercise equipment that they're trying to sell you based just on this one clip, all right? They're all one or the other.
Nice. I like it.
All right, here comes clip number 1.
3, it has random directional action. It goes up, down, sideways, all over the place.
We think, man, what's being sold there? Fishy stuff or exercise equipment?
It's either like one of those like dart around soft plastics, or it's like some sort of like core stability thing. I'm gonna guess it's fishing.
It is, and yeah, you are right. You got that one. That, my friend, that right there is the classic banjo minnow, right?
That's exactly what I thought it was.
There you go, banjo minnow. Try and find a good deal over Thanksgiving weekend on that one, my friend. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna be a hard one.
Well, speaking of Thanksgiving, you know what Thanksgiving always reminds me of?
What is that?
Steelhead.
I think at this point, having hung out with you for a while, that I could do word associations and be like desk lamp, and you'd be like steelhead. You'd be like Honda Accord, steelhead. Everything reminds you of steelhead.
I actually do have a steelhead story about a Honda Accord. Hey, man, look, I
you do.
never give you shit for talking about snakeheads. Ooh, I'm Joe Cermelli. I caught a snakehead. It was 10 pounds. Why doesn't everybody like snakeheads? I can't help what I'm into, man.
Okay. I'm just busting your chops anyway. Steelhead, what about them? Tell us something.
No, you're right. I do talk about steelhead all the time. Also, snakeheads are cool as shit. In fact, I went back and I rewatched season 2, episode 2 of B-Side, and I really want to catch a snakehead now.
It will make it happen this year.
Yeah.
Well,
anyhow,
no, not this year. It's winter 22. Sorry, I don't know what year it is
cool.
anymore. Yeah, either way.
Sucks getting old, man. Anyhow, before you derailed me, I was going to so smoothly segue into your guest, Joe, steelhead guide, Pat Keem.
Oh, gotcha. Fair enough. My bad. Pat, steelhead Pat. Yes.
Yep. In this week's edition of Smooth Moves.
Why did you do that? Why? Why did you do that, Terry? Oh my God.
Joining us today for Smooth Moves, an old buddy of mine from Milwaukee, one of my favorite cities, by the way, Pat Keem of Pat Keem Guide Services here. Pat, how art thou, my friend?
I'm pretty good, man. How are you guys?
Good. We are good. And I'm actually glad you and Hayden are meeting because you're kindred spirits in the Great Lakes steel scene. And I got to say, this is no joke. So we fished together a few years ago. And I was blown away by the steelhead fishing basically in Milwaukee proper. It's like urban steel.
And even then, it was like the fishing was kind of slow, you know, like
I know we did great, but by your standards, it was slow. I know that.
Yeah, it was like 4 or 5 fish, 5 or 6 fish. But we had just the one day to do it. But like a good day,
Not bad.
4 or 5 fish these days obviously is like, okay, that was a great day. But like we're still seeing like 10 to like 12 fish days. And in some instances in the spring, we'll see 15 plus. Sometimes out of the same hole.
Well, so, what I thought was so cool about it, being that close to downtown, was a lot of these steelhead places across the Great Lakes. It's like you have these little sort of one horse kind of towns with this bar and this restaurant, and they have their own vibe going. But to be able to do that and then hang out in Milwaukee, that just has so much great like food and bars and culture and other cool stuff to see and hang out. It's just a very different setting. I loved it.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't feel quite comfortable like steelhead fishing somewhere where there isn't graffiti under bridges and stuff, or shopping carts in the river. And now the new thing in the river is all the weird scooters that we have around. People throw them off the bridges.
Oh, those electronic ones where you can just like kind of take them on the app.
Yeah.
There's got to be some razor scooters. I know a few rivers, oddly, where it's like they're full of razor scooters.
Good.
Yeah, I've seen razor scooters, but these are like ones you can like use an app on your phone, like kind of like bubbler bikes, but it's an electric scooter. And all over the river. It's funny, and they're called birds, so it's like, hey, there's a bird in the river downstream.
That's funny.
Oh, no way. Well, dude, so what's cool is when I met you, you were just like, man around town. Like you were just a local dude that fished. And since then, you have kicked off officially your own guide service, which I think is very cool and unique. And because you know Milwaukee so well, like I think you should expand that beyond foot guiding. Like you could just do like general Milwaukee tours. So like Steelhead, and then I'm going to show you the bronze fawns, and I'm going to take you for the Bloody Mary with the half a chicken in it, and then like you make more money that way. It's just,
actually, I mean, I'm kind of glad that you said that. So
He's taking notes. I can see him.
New idea. So remind me how long you've officially been a guide for hire. It hasn't been that many seasons, right?
This season 2.
Okay, so season 2. Yes, this is very new.
Yeah.
And you it's all on foot. You don't do any boat guiding. So you are just taking people to all the fisheries. How far outside the city do you go? You stay pretty close, right?
Yeah, we really don't leave. It's still considered the city. It's a small, the village of Glendale, which is still Milwaukee.
Gotcha.
Anywhere further north of that on the Milwaukee River, there's not any sort of number opportunities on fish whatsoever. It might be one if you're lucky.
Right.
So
gotcha.
You should brand these as Milwaukee wading tours.
Milwaukee. That's good. Anyway, let's get down to it, man. So you've only been guiding for 2 seasons, but we talked a little bit about this. Great Lakes Steel, foot guiding in the city. I knew you would have something, so the floor is yours for smooth moves, man. Hit us.
All right. Let's see. So I've been thinking this already a few times. I wanted to start by saying that these 2 specific customers of mine were incredible customers and great dudes to fish with and great dudes to hang out with.
Good start.
That's how you know he's going to roast them.
I'm not so much roasting them, but because I know that they'll probably hear it and they'll know that it's them when they hear it. But this was during Chinook this year. It was mid-September, getting towards the end, but we had already been seeing some Chinook around. It was still super slow, but we were catching fish, and it was very hard because it was so hot outside and the water was so hot that these fish would only eat right at sunrise, and they wouldn't even eat at sundown. It was like just when they feel the water.
Yeah. Real small window. Yeah.
So when we first got there, like I wanted to get them a big fish, and they're standing there. We're like talking, whatever. And I say, hey, listen, do not take your eye off of that bobber for any reason. Don't look away from it, because if the half a second that you do, it's going under and you're going to miss it. Not 30 seconds later, I'm staring over the one guy's shoulder, and the other guy cracked a joke, and he looks over at him to respond to that. And over his shoulder, that float just goes down. And I scream too. I'm just like, bobber. And he like almost falls over, like going to get his other hand on the rod. And it happened so fast that he didn't even get to see the bobber come back up. I did, but it just went down, right back up.
Wow. It's that quick of a hit. Yeah.
And so right after that happened, the same dude, he looked down at his feet to shuffle over to the next rock, like boulder, whatever. Happened again. Happened a second time, and he missed the fish. He never got to see the bobber go under or come back up again. This all happened within 60 seconds. And
did he think you were messing with him?
Maybe it just didn't quite take me as seriously as he thought.
Right.
I'm like, dude, this is because it happens to us all the time. Like we'll look away for a split second, bobber's under, set the hook because we were there quick enough. Or sometimes it'll take the bobber under while you're not looking, and it'll take it so hard it'll load the rod itself under the
yeah.
That didn't happen, unfortunately. But I wish it did, but it did not, unfortunately. So, and then we fished the rest of that day, which is day 1, for another 6 hours. They never even got so much as another nibble. So I'm like, don't look away from the bobber ever. Right. But day 2, we hopped in the river. I was like, please, be on time. It's the same deal. We're only going to have this window in the morning to get, 1 or 2 bobber downs right away, maybe 4 or 5 if we're lucky. We get in the river. They didn't look away from their bobbers this time. They got hooked up. They're catching fish, blah, blah, blah. Sun comes up, and that hole we were in just got it just got blanketed in sunlight. It was like, out of all the holes in the stretch we were fishing, that was the first one to get it. And I was like, come on. So in the spot that we're fishing at is, as far as wading goes, to get upstream or really like to get downstream, anywhere for that matter, it's you have to get up on the bank, and the bank is covered in broken concrete from old old shipping, because it's an old shipping channel. Yeah. So all those old concrete shipping docks are there, but they're busted up and turned into, bank riprap and
a couple scooters laying around.
A couple of scooters. Yeah. And like I mentioned, those old concrete, docks. Up in this spot, there are still flat pieces of it that are embedded in the bank that you can stand on. It's nice and level. Some of them are on an angle. So this one specific one that he's standing on, it's on just a slight pitch, and the bottom corner of it is submerged in the water. So he's standing there fishing, and I look over and I see that his feet, both of his feet, he's pretty much standing like, feet together, and he's hanging 10 right off the end of this. Yeah. And so I turn and I see that, and I look at him. I'm like, hey, buddy, make sure that you know where your feet are right now. And he's like looking at me, and he's kind of telling a story. I was like, make sure you know where your feet are. Not more than maybe 2 minutes later, I was like looking upstream at the other guy, seeing what he was doing. I just hear this crash and a splash.
He's in.
He's in. Yeah, he went down, and he didn't go like all the way in. And unfortunately, it happened so fast, I didn't actually get to turn my head quick enough to see it, how much he fell in. But he was just like, almost looking at me immediately, oh my God, how pissed is he? Or
so you weren't watching your clients the way you wanted them to watch their floats, is what you're saying.
No, he was watching his floats for his clients.
I was trying to watch, and that's funny you say that, because I fish personally, I don't fish two bobbers, dude, because that's the exact reason why, because one's going to go under and you're going to be looking at the other one. So this guy went under because I was looking at the other one. I just told him, So, but he's like clawing his way back up real quick. And I was like, are you okay? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm okay. And I was like, I just told
Everybody who ever falls in is always fine because they're too embarrassed. Like, no, this is just barely even in the water.
I want to do that.
Totally fine.
I meant to do that.
Yeah. He, honest to God, had that expression on his face that, I meant to do that. I totally meant to do that. But no, I just kind of shook my head, and I was like, I just don't want anybody to get hurt. Safety is my first priority.
When
because
you think of safety, think of Pat Keem.
Pat Keem is number one safety guy.
This is a story about a bunch of people missing a bunch of things happening, man.
But you know what's funny?
Namely myself.
They're not looking. You're not looking.
But nobody's looking.
But you know what, though, man? You caught him fish that day. And any guy I've ever talked to, it's like some really bad shit can happen to your clients as long as they got their picture and they hooked up.
Yes, absolutely.
That same guy would sue you had he not caught fish that day.
He totally would have. And I even had to mention that too and be like, this is why I have insurance.
Pat's my dude, man. I love Pat. He's like the quintessential Great Lakes steel guide. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that dude. And I don't mean this in a bad way. He has that certain type of crazy all Great Lakes steelhead guys.
Yes.
It's a vibe that we're not going to do anything illegal or shady, but we're going to do a couple things that might feel that way.
Yeah, dude, that's very well said. It's totally a thing in those fisheries. You always feel like you're about to be on the wrong end of an ass kicking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's actually, I almost hate to bring it up, but there's a pretty famous video from the Salmon River a couple seasons ago where a certain person was convinced someone else was somehow fishing on his or her property. I won't even say the gender. Yeah.
I know exactly what video you're talking about, and we should definitely stop right there.
Yeah, because it's just brutal. It's just brutal. But anyway, speaking of being on the wrong side of an ass kicking, I think that's exactly where you might find yourself in this week's installment of Fish News. But first, challenge ahead of the challenge. Tell me, Hayden, is this clip from a fishing gear or exercise equipment infomercial?
But we don't have that kind of time. So we need a device that gives us maximum payoff with minimum input.
Well, they're appealing to being lazy, which speaks to a certain subset of angler, but I'll tell you what, it definitely speaks to folks buying workout equipment off the television. So I'm going to say that's workout.
2 for 2, man. That's the Health Rider, which I'd never heard of till I dove into this. The Health Rider? Dude,
That's
you
my
need to look it
nickname.
up. Do you have a Health Rider tattoo? Like, yeah. Yeah, dude. So in doing this, I found this randomly, and it's like a country western. It's like a very western dude in a very western Montana setting selling this thing. And I don't know who the target market was, but it obviously didn't work out because we've never heard of it. So there you go. But 2 for 2, good for you.
Yeah, well, you know what? We've actually messed this up a little. We didn't give Phil his in for fish news.
Yes, we kind of threw off the rhythm there. Sorry. You are indeed right. Phil, it's time for fish news.
Fish news!
That escalated quickly.
Hey, I bet I know what you're not doing on Black Friday, sitting down to watch the final episode of B-Side Fishing Season 2, but that's okay. Okay, you'll get to it later. I'm not mad at you. But that does, of course, drop today at 1 p.m. Eastern, 11 Mountain on the Meat Eaters YouTube channel. And we're closing it out back in Virginia, this time on the James River, kind of chasing a mixed bag, but the main focus is those famed James River blue cats, which I love a lot. I love the James. I love catfish.
Cool.
Yep, and I'm joined by friend of the show and good personal friend of me personally, Oliver Nye. And you know, if you know anything about Oliver, Big Bass Dreams, you know, big baits for big fish kind of dude. That's what he does so well. And I'll let you know, he flexes that a little bit in here in a surprising way, even though this is primarily a catfish deal. But for the most part, Oliver put down his swim bait rods and soaked some bloody chunks, and we had a smashing good time. Minus some very relatable angling hiccups, which you will see. So,
very relatable angling hiccups, man.
Yeah.
You know, if there is one thing that speaks to me, it's giant cats, man. I just love the hell out of that. And you know, some people don't really get it, and I think that this particular episode of B-Side shows kind of all the highs and lows of giant catfishing.
Of many things, especially because people think giant catfishing is it's kind of like a simpleton way of fishing, like you just huck some bait out there, but there's a lot more to it than that. But yeah, dude, I know you've told me you have a thing for big cats, and that's something you haven't really done. I know you chase a lot of channels, but at some point down the road, man, I got to take you somewhere with like monsters.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I have done plenty of catfishing, and I guess what I would consider a big catfish, I mean, right, it's all like species specific.
Sure,
you know,
sure, yeah.
But I've tagged with my share of like 20+ pound channel cats, and you know, if you're like using what I grew up using,
20 plus, that's 20 plus, that's a giant ass channel cat. I mean, that's a huge channel cat. Anyway,
I have caught channel cats that I thought were legitimately in like record contention, at least like the Pennsylvania state record. In fact, one time I was going to keep one and I was going to submit it for a record. And I asked my buddy, I was like, hey man, look up real quick, what's the catfish record in Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
And he goes, I said, what's a channel cat record in Pennsylvania? He goes, oh, it's like 50 pounds or something like that. He literally looked it up on his phone.
No, it's the wrong catfish.
Yeah, he looked up flatheads.
Yep.
And I let I have a picture of that fish. I'll send it to you. But yeah, man, I was super excited to see the catfishing, and man, I think you guys just, I don't know, to me, that's what it's kind of all about, the way that you guys portrayed it.
Yeah. I mean, truth be told, man, like I can get just as excited about chunking monster cats as I can like chasing stripers or pike. Catfish don't get enough love, in my opinion. You know,
not
so they got
love.
I know. So they got a little more love out of me in B-Side. Anyway, let's get to it. Grab a turkey sandwich, leftover turkey sandwich, settle in, and remember this is a competition. Hayden and I do not know which story the other guy is bringing to the table, and at the end, our stovetop loving audio engineer Phil will judge us and declare a winner. You're laughing. Do you eat stovetop, Hayden? Or is that like can't
no,
like you can't be sure the sage
Phil's
in the
just gotta do
stovetop is
something with all
not
that
wild
left-
mountain sage?
No, Phil's just got to do something with all that leftover white bread.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Like that. Anyway, it is actually my lead this week. So here we go. Let's do some news. Shout out to Bent listener Joe. It's I'm going to butcher it. It's either Steinwinder. Is it Winder or Winder? Joe Steinwinder for this one. And
call him
truthfully,
Sidewinder.
Steinwinder. Good guy. I like him. Maybe I'd have found this on my own, maybe not. But he presented it on a silver platter via the Bent email inbox, and I thank him for that because it's a dandy, okay? Now, this actually comes from Yahoo Finance. Headline, a sport fishing boat pollutes as much as 162 school buses. Will boat businesses survive regulation? So this is happening in California. Compelling journalism. So this is happening in California, and the sport fishing boats being referred to, here are predominantly large party boat style boats and long range style fishing boats that can accommodate a bunch of anglers. Of course, this style of boat is not unique to California. They exist pretty much everywhere that you find saltwater. And what's happening is not only affecting these fishing boats, but also the whale watching fleets of the same size, typically same kind of boats. In some places, they're fishing one day, whale watching the next. Very common, right? So according to the story, California air pollution regulators have already clamped down on emissions from big rig trucks, buses, and cargo ships. They have now set their sights on the sport fishing and whale watching industry because they say their aging boats with aging diesel-powered engines are responsible for what officials say is an outsized amount of dangerous pollution that lingers over the state's marinas and bays. The California Air Resources Board is meeting to consider a measure that will require sport fishing, whale watching, and other excursion boat owners to install the newest and cleanest diesel engines and potentially also a filter to reduce exhaust pipe emissions. Now, before I go on here, I can attest that wherever you find party boats and whale watching boats, the fleet is often made up of very old vessels, right? These are 50 to 100 foot boats. Most were custom built at some point or bought used by the current operators. And yeah, a lot of the party boats you fish on were built in the 70s or 80s, maybe even earlier in some places. These were boats that were meant to last a long time. You don't kind of like get a new one every couple of seasons, right? And it's fair to say that when a lot of these boats were built or purchased, it was a much more booming time for the party boat industry than it is now in many parts of the country. And many of these party boat businesses were started decades ago, and the operation stays within one family, which leads to the obvious issue here. This is right from the story. The boat owners are mostly mom-and-pop businesses that cater to blue-collar anglers and families. They say that they don't have the finances, unlike other big businesses, to meet the proposed regulations, and that many may be forced to close up shop, right?
It's super interesting, man. Like, this is one industry where it's half, a lot of it like is lifestyle and passion, right?
Yes.
You know, a lot of these folks grew up this way doing this thing. You know, their daddies were commercial fishermen or charter captains, and like this is what they've committed to doing. The overhead is so crazy high.
Oh yeah, I'm going to get into that because that's a big part of the deal.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Here, right?
Continue.
No. But no, that's where we're going, right? Yes. No. So here's a quote, right?
Yeah.
I'm terrified. I'm supposed to learn a new trade now, said Jeff Jessup, 46, part owner of 3 fishing boats and a landing in San Pedro, who has been in the business, like you were just saying, since he was a teenager working as a deckhand. He says, I thought this was my future and my retirement. So I'm not going to get super detailed on the fight happening here, but basically you have, quote, business experts arguing that environmental regulations have had very little to do with cutting the overall number of jobs in the economy. Instead, they say that regulations often shift jobs from one industry to another, like as an example, away from petroleum industries towards clean energy businesses, right? And that's all well and good, but you can't apply that to every single industry that regulations like this will affect. Right? So it says, per the story, in the case of mom and pop businesses such as boat operators, environmental regulations often force the industry to consolidate to a smaller number of better-funded companies willing to pay for the environmental upgrades. The thing is, right, this is such a small niche business already that in many instances, it's very hard to envision that consolidation, right?
Right.
The story says that many of the wood and fiberglass boat in California's fleet, they couldn't even accommodate the new, cleaner diesel engines if they wanted to, nor the diesel filters. Like those boats are just, they're not going to fit those engines. So how do you fix that, right? Your only option in many cases is to upgrade to a newer metal boat that's going to cost $2 to $5 million, right? Yeah. And the representatives from the Air Resource Board are telling captains, well, if you just jack your prices by $40, you'll cover it. Jack your prices $40, and our math says you'll be fine. You'll be able to get a new boat with cleaner engines. So the Air Resources Board, I mean, but that's the disconnect, and I'll get into that in a second. Yeah, the Air Resources Board also estimates that in San Pedro area alone, sport fishing and whale watching boats generate 21% of all emissions, and say the proposed regulation is estimated to avoid, and how they get these numbers so specific, I don't know, but 531 premature deaths, 161 hospital admissions, and 236 hospital visits over the next decade or so. How do you figure that out?
I don't know, man. I feel like there are like 531 premature deaths, 161 hospital admissions, and 236.
Every 5 minutes.
No, I think just as a result of people going fishing.
That's, you're probably right. Man. You're probably right. Now, here's the final twist to this, right? Quoting the story again. The state agency is considering similar emissions regulations for commercial fishing operations, which operate more than 1,000 boats in the state. If it passes, though, that program won't take effect until 2035. The Air Resources Board plans to give commercial fishing boat owners extra time to comply because agency officials say the businesses don't have the same ability to pass on the cost of new engines and boats to their customers.
That seems like the opposite of what you would think.
Now, it does. I will say, though, I'm assuming that they're talking about mom and pop commercial operations, not like the big corporation, not like 500-foot boat owners. Yeah, exactly. But still. So if these regulations pass, it will require all the boats in the fishing fleet to be up to code in 2023. But boat owners who have financial difficulties meeting the deadline may request postponing compliance until as late as 2034. And guess what? I'm betting the vast majority of them will ask for the extension, right?
Well, hey, man. Now, here's the thing, dude. 2 years is a pretty unreasonable amount of time to buy a new $2 to $5 million boat. Now, 10 years, 10 years, I think that everybody can afford a new $2 to $5 million boat. I think that's plenty of time to save up $2 to $5 million.
Does that include
I don't know about
me?
you, Joe.
10 years from now, can I get a $5 million 72-foot Viking?
I mean, I think it's economically
That's
feasible.
Another shout out for you, by the way, Viking. If you're listening, I'm just going to keep dropping you until you give me the damn boat.
Oh my God.
Anyway, so this is a really shitty situation. And I'm not saying there aren't two sides. I'm all for cleaner air and a better tomorrow, as are you, right? There's no argument there. But I also feel like you don't have any yet, right? But I also feel like I have a better understanding of how the party boat business works than a lot of these, quote, experts and researchers. And I'm certain the boat owners feel the same way. Like, you have to consider how much prices have already been hiked just to accommodate rising fuel costs. Just that alone. Like, when I was a kid, it cost like $40 a person to go fluke fishing on a party boat. Now, I think it's closer to $100. And then now you factor in, regulation changes within certain fisheries. To use fluke as an example again, they have to be so big to keep anymore. Like a keeper fluke now, if I caught it when I was 8 years old, the whole dock would have been like, holy shit, did you see that fluke that kid Joey caught over on Sea Dock? Like, it's a massive fluke, right? And it's very difficult to catch keepers and your limit of them. So for a lot of people, it doesn't pay to go on a party boat to catch them anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was just out last week and our TOG season just opened here. There were 10 party boats out with very few people on any of them. And years ago, they'd have been packed. But for many people, I think that a party boat is no longer like the cheap option. I mean, for a lot of people, $150, like that's not cheap anymore. And frankly, I question how many even stay in business already. I question how they make even enough to keep the boats running, let alone turn a significant profit. So for these boats in California, so it's a pretty crushing blow, man, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I couldn't imagine kind of just having that, like that burden just sort of like thrust upon you, even if it's for these like objectively good reasons. The problem that I often see.
Well, that's
with,
the problem, isn't it? Like, it's not a bad reason. The core, if you look at the core reason.
Yeah. The core reason is good. The thing is like, as folks, we see problems, and because the problem exists, we also assume that a perfect solution exists. And I think like that's where a lot of folks get hung up, is like in looking for these perfect solutions that don't exist.
Yeah.
I don't really know what to do with the information that you just gave me about this, like, because it seems the number one thing that we have to do as folks is work to better our environment, because you know, you get one. True. On the flip side of that, it's like, can you justify all this like collateral damage, you know, to make up for how we like f***ed up since the Industrial Revolution?
You're right.
Just,
I mean, you're going deep, but even on just a lesser level, it just pains me, even though I don't know the full story on the commercial ops, it just seems like another way to kick mom and pop in the ass. Like, why them first? I mean, like, these businesses are struggling so hard already. And like you said, it's an entertainment industry. They're not, a party boat's not a necessity, you know?
Well, let me ask you this, though. Like, how, in this particular scenario, how don't you kick, like, a mom and pop in the ass?
It's very difficult.
You know, it's
very difficult.
It's like with, like, long, you know, own and operator truck drivers. You know, it's like, how don't you kick them in the ass? Is it like a grant situation?
Yeah. And we're not going to figure that out right now, but it's just another way.
Listeners, this podcast is going to go on until Joe and
we are
I
not
solve
stopping
the climate crisis. It's okay.
I'm going to go make another turkey
climate change
sandwich. We'll be here for a while. Yeah, right on. So, you know, sad story. It's just another blow to fishing. You know, we already deal with so much of that with regulations that get thrust upon us that aren't thrust upon commercial guys and back and forth. I hope this figures its way out, and at least they buy 10 years to figure it out, not have to have it done by 23. So.
Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls. I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like them. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.
Hey, Joe, man, let's move on here. Let's move into a way that recreational fishing and commercial fishing might be helping save the environment.
I love it. I
you
love
like
it.
that transition?
Bring it. I like it's good. It's so
10
smooth.
for 10.
Yeah.
All right. So I know I've been on the international beat for the last couple, 2-3 weeks here, but now I'm bringing it back to, I guess, Montana terms. You know, right down the road from where I am.
Okay.
Unlike a lot of stories I've been bringing to the table, this is sort of like a story that requires a little bit of context and unpacking, and I'm going to break this shit down into like a where, what, when kind of deal,
Okay.
just for organization's sake.
Yeah, do it. I also wanted to say that down the road in Montana could be like 3 hours away, right? It's different.
It is. It's about that. So, speaking of, let's start with where.
Right.
Okay, so this story comes from Lena Beck writing for The Counter. And Lena, I apologize if I mispronounced your first name there.
Okay.
So there's this big ass lake out here called Flathead Lake, and it's like 200 square miles or something. I think it's the biggest lake in the state. You know, to contextualize, bigger than Lake Tahoe. Now, Flathead Lake straddles an important boundary, the boundary between the state of Montana and the Flathead Reservation, home of the Confederate Salish and Kootenai tribes.
Yep.
This is important, and we're going to get to why later on. Anyhow, Flathead Lake basically forever has been a stronghold for what I think of as one of the defining species of the American West, and that's the bull trout. So that's our what? If you're not
Journalism
familiar,
class, throw it back. Yeah.
if you're not familiar, bull trout are basically like a giant. I mean, I know you are familiar, Joe, but this is for listeners. Bull trout are basically a giant badass char, and incidentally, they actually look a little bit like Lakers. They're super cool, and they're also super protected. In fact, there are only a handful of fisheries outside of Canada where you can legally target them.
Yeah, and I mean, in all the places I've been, I've yet to go on a bully trip, like a legit, you're allowed to fish for them here bully trip. It's still on my bucket list.
Yeah, so we got our where, we got our what. Now let's talk about when. And there are actually like 3 whens in this story. You got 1905, 1981, and a couple dates more or less in the last 2 decades, which I'm going to lump together here mostly for sentence structure. Let's start from the beginning. In 1905, Montana officials made the dumbass decision to put non-native fish into Flathead Lake, among them the lake trout. The lake trout took to their new environment the best out of all these non-native species that were introduced. And for a long time, it wasn't a big deal. In fact, it was like pretty rare that you caught one, but they were just kind of this omnipresent. Folks refer to them as Mackinaw. So I'm going to use that word in here a couple times. And dear listener,
now we know what it
means.
is. Yep. Knowing's half the battle.
Okay. So 1905, and then in 1981. So it's been fine for like 75 years. Then in 1981, Mice's shrimp were introduced into the lake. The idea was that they'd be a great food resource for the kokanee salmon, another non-native fish that inhabited the Flathead.
Right.
Well, this backfired spectacularly. Kokanee salmon almost exclusively eat zooplankton and weren't super interested in the shrimp at all. Mice's shrimp also eat zooplankton, and eventually the shrimp population grew to such numbers that they outcompeted the kokanee. By 1990, there were no more kokanee in Flathead Lake, which in the context of this story, like, is kind of unimportant. The important thing is that were a lot of shrimp kicking around. So the kokanee weren't about them, but you know who did love to eat them?
Who's that?
The lake trout, specifically juvenile lake trout. And because the shrimp were so abundant, the lake trout population exploded. But these little shrimp can only sustain a laker for so long. Eventually, the lakers had to eat other, bigger things. Do you see where this is going, Joe?
I see where this is going because this happens all over the country. Lakers are a great idea until they're not, and they start eating all the native fish and things like that.
Yep, they started eating all the native fish and things like that, and particularly
the bull trout.
Bull trout.
Yeah.
By 1995, there were estimated to be about 1,000 left in Flathead Lake.
Yeah. Brutal. Yeah.
It pretty much extirpated. Anyhow, so back to the fact that Flathead is on both res land and Montana state land. It became obvious to both sides that this shit was a major problem. So around 2000, they came together and decided that they needed to tackle this situation. From what I can tell, the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, from here out, I'm going to refer to them as CSKT. And the state, that's an acronym, bro.
Okay.
that started out on the same foot, opting for an angler-centric solution to the problem. The CSKT started a program called Mac Days, Mac is short for Mackinac. And at the inaugural events, like 900 Mackinac were caught. Now, the number is close to 60,000 caught annually at these events.
Jeez, that's a lot of, yeah,
it's a lot. Despite this call, the CSKT noticed that the population was only expanding to the point that by the mid-2000s, they realized that an angler approach wasn't going to be sufficient. The state disagreed and continued to push for an angler-based approach to management. But long story short, eventually the state came around and saw what the CSKT had seen all along, that a different approach was absolutely necessary.
Well, yeah, man, and this sort of thing has happened in a lot of places with Lakers. Dare I bring up snakeheads after being berated about my snakehead obsession earlier in this podcast? But I mean, same deal. It's like, hey, no limit, catch all you want, catch all but that often doesn't work to fix the problem. Like, you can open the limits, you could say, kill all you want. Sometimes, the hunter angler sort of approach to conservation, it isn't always the be all end all. It's not always the answer. It's just, it's going to happen that way.
Yeah, it can be part of it.
Sure.
It can always be part of it in most circumstances,
right.
but sometimes it's just too big of a problem. So what the CSKT did was develop a commercial fishing program. See, kids, commercial fishing isn't always the devil, and it can, in fact, help a fishery. Anyhow, they basically net a shit ton of these things and sell them to restaurants, grocery stores, and private buyers. It's about 5.5 times more effective than the Mac days alone. The Mac days alone represent about 4,000 pounds of fish removed annually, where the commercial fishery represents closer to 22,000 pounds.
Right. So, I mean, are they pretty confident? Do they think this is really going to solve the problem and get rid of the Lakers and Flathead once and for all? Are they confident in that?
Sort of.
Okay.
They think that this is going to. Their goal isn't to get rid of them altogether because, short of like poisoning a body of water, that's basically impossible.
Right.
They do think that this is going to reduce the population of Lakers by like 75%, which, based upon their projections, will get the bull trout population to bounce back to around 90%.
Right.
Which is an infinitely more tenable situation and would constitute like a huge conservation success story. Anyhow, that's pretty much my fish news story. It's not exactly like a current event, but it highlights how complex our fisheries can be and how much impact our own meddling has in the survival of our native fish, whether it's to increase sport fisheries or, a lot of times to see fish introduced to grass carp, aid some sort of perceived problem. It also demonstrates like the importance of including native folks in the management of their own land. A lot of times, we like to come in and decide what needs to be done, but ultimately we can learn a lot by deferring a certain amount of our opinion to maybe the people that it impacts the most. And I think we can learn a lot from that.
Great example of a lot of things that sort of get bad rap and have a lot of infighting working together here. And I certainly hope this is the solution, even though it's sort of harsh. It's a quicker, more harsh way to get rid of all these fish. The bull trout are more important. And I think in a case where you're not fighting about, and I'm not knocking it, but we've done stories here about like chubs and minnows that were native that went away, and then there were fights to bring those back. Bull trout's a pretty special fish. I mean, I by my own admission, it's something I have not gone to chase yet. So I hope to see that work. So I don't know. We'll defer to Phil to see what worked in our favor this week, Phil. We'll have to put down the bowl of the turkey on white bread in the bowl of stovetop for a second. And then after that, I don't know. It's I think you and I deserve to go have a drink in honor of Thanksgiving weekend.
Are we going to a bar?
We are.
Hey, assholes. Despite the big divorced parents' energy coming from my mom and dad in the late 90s, it may shock you to learn that I have never had stovetop stuffing. I had my fair share of DiGiorno's pizza and hamburger helper, but I don't think I've had a loaf of white bread in my house since 9/11. Those events are unrelated. That's just kind of how the timing worked out. I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, the winner this week is the lake trout. Congrats on winning the big fishy lottery, and I hope you had a lovely Thanksgiving.
So, Hayden, before we scurry the show along, keep moving forward here, how about another clip?
All right, let's do it.
All right, great. Round 3. Is this a clip from a fishing infomercial or exercise infomercial?
But it failed at first, but then it began to work. And once it worked, I knew I was onto something. I quit my job.
Well, somebody talking about how they quit their job for this immediately makes me think it was fishing related.
It's a tough one. I've tried to make them increasingly more difficult.
The VHS like static makes me think it was low budget to begin with. So this dude quit his job to pursue this and didn't have a lot of money making his infomercial. I'm going to go fishing again.
Oh, man. Good. I'm proud of you. 3 for 3. That's the flying
Yeah,
lure.
man.
That is flying lure inventor Alex Langer talking about what he did to get the flying lure off the ground. But it's not flying that high today, to be honest with you.
Alex.
So, I always thought it was a great lure. I still have some. Great lure. It's the tube that it falls backwards. Like you throw it against the dock and it falls backwards under the dock.
Ooh.
I actually had Hank Parker himself once tell me that the flying lure is real good, and I believe him. Anyway, those were fun. So, all right, it's kind of time to bring the show home here, and I think there's nothing that says home for the holidays quite like getting wasted with your dumbass high school friends at the local bar you've been sneaking into since you were sitting through AP Calc. You sat through AP Calc, right?
You are grossly overestimating how good of a student I was, man. I was particularly when it came to math, I was terrible.
All right. Look, that may be the case, but let's go have a drink and we can talk about where it all went wrong. It's time for one of my favorite segments, and this week we have a great one coming to us from the Silver State. It's time for That's My Bar.
Best goddamn bartender from Timbuktu to Portland, Maine. Or Portland, Oregon, for that matter.
Now, I've always associated Thanksgiving weekend, it's kind of a drinking weekend, right? But I will admit that, back in the day, I never really did the Thanksgiving Eve bar crawl because I was usually fishing Thanksgiving morning, and I didn't want to get all banged up. What about you? Were you like, was that a party night or a get some sleep night?
Well, see, here's the thing, man. I hate everybody that I went to high school with, so I was not trying to run into them at a bar.
That is very fair. I can sort of identify with that. Yes, for sure. That's a good call. Okay, there you go. Anyway, it's also a big travel weekend, of course. And maybe you have family 3 hours northeast of Las Vegas, though probably not. Because I think only 5 or 6 families live there. Yeah, so the odds are unlikely. But regardless, about 3 hours northeast of Vegas, you will find the town of Posh, Nevada, which is the closest town to the bar we're featuring, which is the Eagle Valley Resort. And this nomination comes to us from listener Ben Parks, and here's what he says. Eagle Valley Resort might as well have a sign out front that says, "Degenerate Anglers Welcome." I've never actually looked for a definition of the word resort, but I'm pretty sure this ain't it. The bar dog will greet you, the locals will scowl at you, and the mixture of cigarette smoke and the smell of stale beer will transport you back to the 1970s when your dad lets you sometimes tag along with him to the bar. Located about 3 hours northeast of Las Vegas and just a few miles from the Nevada-Utah border is the best fishing bar I've ever found in Nevada. While there must be at least 3 more fishing bars in Nevada, I haven't found them yet. With Eagle Valley Reservoir a few miles upstream and Echo Canyon Reservoir 8 miles downstream, you have two, all caps, fishing options around here. And in parentheses, he says, us Nevadans get excited about fishing options, not many.
Okay, well, so they might not have a ton of fishing options out there in the desert, although Pyramid Lake's in Nevada, right?
It is, and I got to tell you, man, like I've only desert fished a little bit. I've always wanted to fish around Vegas or film something there, but he's right. Like there's not a ton of options. I don't spend that much time in the desert.
And even with the options that there are, Ben doesn't exactly sell us on those.
No.
He continues, after you've spent a day soaking power bait for stalker rainbows or throwing lures for the unimpressive largemouths and crappie, or drowning mealworms on the very short ice season, as one could imagine, you can head to the resort for a cold one. Part general store for the necessities. 4th of July colored power bait with sparkles is crushing them today.
It's the best part right there.
Part bar and part casino with video poker and slot machines. Parenthesis, what else would you expect from a tiny bar in nowhere, Nevada?
Yep.
A few crusty trout and bass mounts on the walls, along with various dilapidated mounted critters. It all really sets the ambiance meter to my sister-in-law is an aspiring... I'm reading this for the first time. My sister-in-law is an aspiring rustic interior decorator.
Yeah, dude. So I gotta say, right, it was such a nice touch on the 4th of July covered power bait.
Right.
That like really sets the vibe of the area. Okay. Also, I've used that before. Truth. And it works. I'm pretty sure the glitter it's infused with is biodegradable. At least I think.
It is not.
Anyway, it's probably not. No. Anyway, moving along. The more remote the place is, the more needs it has to fulfill. RV spots? Yup. Rent a cabin? Yup. Fishing supplies, beer, butter, milk, eggs, replacement mantles for your ancient Coleman lantern? Yup. Cell service? Nope. Your kids can slam billiard balls around on the table until one of them smashes a finger. You can work your way to the bathrooms through the undulations that you know means there were at least 3 phases of construction, in parentheses, brother-in-law is an aspiring rustic architect. Or you can drink your beer in silence as you stare at the sign behind the bar that says, "We don't call 911," with a barrel end view of a 357. No shit, your phone isn't going to work here anyway.
This dude must be young because we got to remind him that there are such things as landlines, and I bet you
right.
This relic of a bar might have one.
Right. I still have one. The only people that call are Spam and my mother.
Well,
I don't know why we keep it.
Landline or not, man, you know the lone sheriff of that county is already in there anyhow, and he's probably more inclined to help hide the bodies rather than do something about it.
Yes, it reminds me of the scene in The Vacation when the sheriff is the mechanic that rips Clark Griswold off on bald tires. Anyway, well, I can't say I don't think that we're going to rush out to fish there after that exciting overview of the angling opportunities. This does sound like an absolutely killer bar. I would drink there with bells on. Ben, thank you for sending that one along. And if you've got a fishy dive you want shouted out, send your nomination and description to us at bent@themeateater.com. So that's it for this week. And let's be honest, most of you are probably out doing fun things on Black Friday. You had a day off. So if you caught up after the holiday, I guess I could say probably happy Cyber Monday to most of you at this point.
Yeah, we hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving and that you're getting on the water or in the field this weekend with family or just the good people you choose to surround yourself with. And you should tell all those people about the Bent podcast. Maybe ask them to send a bar nomination or an awkward photo or a Selbin item to bent@themeateater.com.
You should definitely ask that. And you should also definitely keep using those Bent Podcast and Degenerate Angler hashtags on Instagram. And speaking of Instagram, let's close out with a final infomercial clip just for you, the listeners, okay? We're gonna close out with one. Feel free to comment on my Friday Bent post on Instagram and let me know if you think this is a hokey fishing product or terrible exercise equipment being pushed. Either way, no matter which one it is, bonus points if you can name the product.
If it just doesn't work for you, we've got a 6-month money-back guarantee. That's right. You can try this thing out for 6 months, and if you don't like it, at any point, you can send it back to us and we'll give you a refund.
Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.